Welcome to OK Miniatures. Today I decided to work on a wargaming table, as you can see. So I started out by cutting foam. I decided on having a base size of 22 inches by 30 inches, which just kind of seemed like a nice standard wargaming table size. I don't currently play any wargaming games, but I'd like to in the future, so I thought I'd have just like a good all-around board. There's some skirmishes for Warhammer that seem to use this, and other games use like a 44 by 30, which means that if I just put two of these next to each other, it'd end up being the right size. So I thought it would be a good starting size sort of deal. We'll see if that's true. I built up layers for different terrain variation to give line of sight blockage stuff. Something like that. And I tried to keep it somewhat symmetrical, so I have the tall layers on both sides and a few slightly higher layers back. I was thinking like there could be access points to these higher areas with like bridges from here to here sort of deal on both sides, just to give more access to these high areas. Okay, so this is where I'm at now. I worked on the idea that I had before, and I just built up some layers of these things, and I had this idea to put like a little tunnel sort of through there, just kind of to offset this little cave on the other side, and I think that'll be really cool. It might just break everything horribly, but we'll see. I'm really liking how this is going so far. And once I was happy with these layers, I just glued them together using... So I started out trying hot glue. Hot glue was fast, but it kind of like left a layer, like the pieces wouldn't push together completely. And they still had a bit of give to them once it was dry. So I switched to using liquid nails, which takes a lot longer to dry, but it seems to work better. And then when the liquid nails was mostly dried, I just shaded off the edges, kind of rounding them around a little bit, so it wouldn't just be a sharp edge where the one foam layer ends and the other starts. I did cover this up a bit more like in later steps, but the nicer the transitions are now, the easier it'll be later. The next step was to cover it with some sort of modeling clay, or I was going to use sculpt mold, which I haven't used before, but I couldn't figure out any local stores that carried it, so decided instead to use drywall and mud. So that's a little bit soupy for what I was doing, so I decided to throw in some sand with it and then give it a nice little gritty texture, and I also used some paint just to make it work as like a base coat. Kind of like a lot of people do with like Mod Podge or PVA glue. So I covered everything with that, and I ran out towards the end. I didn't feel like mixing up more, so I just left some of the foam green. I figured I'd give it a little bit of a variation in texture, and I'd figure it out later. So I went on to adding a black wash to everything, basically. I used a thicker version than like my pre-mixed up one. I just added a little bit of water to some paint just to give it a really dark look, since some of the mud was a little bit pinkish, a little too pink for me. It just didn't look right. So went through, covered everything with this, and that really made a big difference. It helps fill in like the recesses and whatnot and give it like a varied texture. I probably could have gone back over it with a dry brush after this, but I didn't end up doing that since there is quite a bit of variation on these textures as is. Then I covered the remaining like exposed foam with just some paint. I used burnt sienna and black mixed together, which I think gives a really cool rock color. I would love to do this for some other project again. I really like it. The color is awesome, but it is way more saturated than like this one and this rock area, and especially this rock area. It's much lighter, and it just has a really great contrast. I think it might be a little bit too much of a contrast, but I'm not sure. I still really like it. I think especially over here though, where I added some of that color to kind of mix it throughout the piece, I think it transitions too quickly. But you live, you learn. Finally, I added some resin. Did a little resin pour in that creek. So I was looking up pictures of like desert areas, desert stream beds, that sort of thing. And they had this really like muddy look, so that's kind of what I was going for, but I didn't quite get there. This looks more like stagnant water look, which I think still works. Wasn't quite what I was going for, but I really like it. And it also ties in well with these burnt sienna colored rocks. Also, there's no bubbles in this resin, which is awesome since the last couple I've been having a lot of bubbles in them. I think it's because it's a very thin resin pour. So basically, I'm 90% sure that the resin I bought is made for very thin pours. And I've been using it for thicker ones, so using products for the way they were designed to really makes a difference. And then I figured, there's a lot of water in a desert, rocky area. It should probably have a few bushes or grass growing. I didn't add very many. I think I added like 5 total, because I was really going for like a rocky, deserty terrain, especially with like all these grays and browns. That's just what it felt like, and I think it looks really good like that. So I just added a few, and I might be able to do a few more. I'm not going to though, since I like it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more terrain building content like this, please consider subscribing. With that, I'll see you in the future.